The colony of Ashara 6 was burning. Governor Yellen stood on the observation deck of the Planetary Command Center, watching the Vrexel warships descend through the clouds like metal locusts. There were 40 of them, more than enough to reduce every city on the planet to ash. The Vrexel hegemony had been expanding for centuries, conquering world after world with brutal efficiency. Now, they had come for HFY 6. "Governor, the evacuation ships are loaded," her aide said from behind her. "But we can only fit the 30,000 people. The rest will have to fight." Yellen's voice was steady, but her hearts were pounding. "How long until the Conclave Relief Fleet arrives?" The aide was silent for a moment too long. "There is no relief fleet, is there?" Yellen asked. "The Conclave has declared HFY 6 strategically expendable. They send their condolences and their prayers." Yellen closed her eyes. Prayers. The Conclave had ruled this galaxy for 40,000 years, and all they could offer was prayers. She turned to face her aide, her expression hard. "Then we die on our feet. Sound the general alarm. Every able-bodied citizen is to report for defense duty. We will make the Vrexel pay for every street they take." The next hours were chaos. Soldiers took position behind barricades made of vehicles and rubble. Mothers kissed their children goodbye and picked up weapons. Old men who remembered wars from centuries ago dusted off their armor and stood beside young recruits who had never seen blood. Above them, the Vrexel flagship hung in the sky like a metal moon, its weapons charging with a high-pitched whine that made teeth ache. Then something strange happened. The flagship's weapons stopped charging. On every Vrexel ship, alarms began to scream. Sensors that had been tracking the planet below suddenly swung outward, focusing on a point in space beyond the system's outer planets. Something was coming. Governor Yellen saw it on her tactical display before she saw it with her own eyes. 12 contacts emerging from fold space in perfect formation. They were not Conclave ships. They were not Vrexel ships. They were something else entirely. The vessels were massive, easily matching the Vrexel flagship in size. But where Vrexel ships were curved and organic, these were angular and harsh. They had no decorative plating, no ceremonial markings. Every line, every plate, every weapon was designed for function. These were not ships built for exploration or trade. These were ships built for war. Unknown vessels. The Vrexel commander. Broadcast on an open channel. You are interfering with hegemony military operations. Identify yourselves and withdraw, or you will be destroyed. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then the response came. It was broadcast in every known language, and dozens of unknown ones. The voice was calm, cold, and absolutely certain. Civilians detected in conflict zone. Hostile forces. Stand down or be removed. The Vrexel commander laughed. Removed? You are 12 ships against 40. You are... He never finished the sentence. The lead unknown vessel fired. Governor Yellen had seen Conclave weapons in action. She had seen Vrexel plasma cannons reduce cities to glass. Nothing had prepared her for this. The beam that struck the Vrexel flagship was not elegant. It did not shimmer or glow with beautiful colors. It was a simple, brutal line of white light that crossed the distance between the ships in less than a heartbeat. The flagship's shields flickered once, twice, and then collapsed. The beam continued through the ship's hull as if it were paper. The flagship exploded. 10,000 Vrexel warriors died in an instant, their commander's laughter still echoing on the open channel. The 11 remaining unknown vessels began to move. They did not fly in the sweeping, artistic patterns favored by Conclave ships. They moved like predators. Quick, direct, efficient. Each one picked a target and closed the distance with terrifying speed. The Vrexel fought back. Plasma bolts and missile swarms filled the space between the fleets. Some of the shots landed. Yellen watched one unknown vessel take a direct hit from a Vrexel main cannon, a weapon designed to crack planets. The vessel did not even slow down. Its hull glowed where the plasma had struck it. The energy was being absorbed, channeled somewhere inside the ship. Seconds later, the vessel returned fire, and the Vrexel cruiser that had shot it simply ceased to exist. The battle lasted 11 minutes. When it was over, the Vrexel invasion fleet was nothing but drifting debris and frozen bodies. 40 warships destroyed by 12. Not one of the unknown vessels had been lost. Governor Yellen stood in stunned silence as a shuttle detached from the lead vessel and descended toward the planet. Her soldiers raised their weapons uncertainly, unsure whether these newcomers were saviors or a different kind of conqueror. The shuttle landed in the main square. Its hatch opened with a hiss of pressurized air. And out stepped a figure that Yellen had never seen before. The creature was bipedal, standing on 2 legs with 2 arms at its sides. It wore heavy armor that covered its entire body, painted in dark gray and marked with strange symbols. When it removed its helmet, Yellen saw a face unlike any species. In the conclave, flat, with 2 forward-facing eyes, a small nose, and a mouth that curved upward in what might have been a smile. It was female, Yellen realized. Old, by whatever standards her species used, with lines around her eyes and gray streaks in her dark hair. But her eyes were sharp and clear, and she moved with the confidence of someone who had seen 1,000 battles and won them all. "Governor Yellen?" the creature said. Her voice was rough but warm. "Yes," Yellen managed. "Who? What are you?" The creature extended a hand, a gesture Yellen did not recognize, but somehow understood. "Admiral Maya Chun, United Earth Navy. Sorry we're late." Traffic was murder. Yellen took the offered hand. The human's grip was strong and steady. "The Conclave said your kind were a myth." Admiral Chun's smile widened. "Yeah, we get that a lot." Behind her, more humans were emerging. From the shuttle, already beginning to organize medical aid and supply distribution. They moved with practiced efficiency, speaking to each other in a language Yellen did not understand, but their intentions were clear. They were here to help. "Why?" Yellen asked. "Why did you save us? You owe us nothing." "We are strangers to you." Admiral Chum looked up at the sky, where the debris of the Vrexel fleet was still burning in the atmosphere like a million falling stars. "Because we know what it's like to stand alone," she said quietly. "We know what it's like to face the end with no one coming to save you. And we decided a long time ago that if we ever had the power to help, we would." She turned back to Yellen, and her eyes were fierce. "No one gets abandoned on our watch. Not anymore." Across the galaxy, 1,000 sensor stations recorded the battle. Intelligence networks buzzed with frantic analysis. In the halls of the Conclave, ancient counselors stared at their screens in disbelief. The myth was real. The Primates had left their world, and they had brought an Armada. The message spread, faster than light itself, carried by terrified whispers and panicked transmissions. It reached every corner of civilized space within hours. The galaxy would never be the same. The Conclave was in chaos. In the 40,000 years since its founding, the elder species had faced many challenges: wars, plagues, the rise and fall of empires. But they had always faced them from a position of strength, secure in the knowledge that no power in the galaxy could match them. That security was gone. Emergency sessions filled the halls of Velanther day and night. Counselors screamed at each other across ancient tables. Military commanders demanded immediate action, though none could agree on what that action should be. And through it all, the same question echoed from every corner of Conclave space. Who were these humans, and where had they come from? Kiravel had the answers. She stood before the same council that had laughed at her weeks before, her silver scales gleaming under the harsh lights. This time, no one was laughing. They listened in silence as she presented everything she had learned, the data from the ancient probe, Tovan's testimony, and the intercepted communications from the human fleet. "The species calls itself humanity," she said. "They evolved on the third planet of a yellow star in the quarantine sector, a world they call Earth. Everything the old story said about them is true. Their planet is one of the most hostile environments we have ever documented. Extreme temperature variations, constant seismic activity, deadly radiation from their star, and a biosphere filled with predators and diseases. How could anything intelligent evolve in such conditions?" Archon Velith demanded. "They didn't just evolve. They survived." Kiravel pulled up a holographic display showing Earth's history. They endured ice ages that lasted 10,000 years. They survived asteroid impacts that killed most of their planet's species. They nearly destroyed themselves with nuclear weapons less than 500 years ago. And every time, they rebuilt. They adapted. They became stronger. The council stared at the display in silence. "But that is not the most important thing," Kiravel continued. "The most important thing is what happened 200 years ago." She changed the display. Now it showed a small, primitive spacecraft, angular and crude, but clearly functional. 200 years ago, humanity developed fold space technology. They sent exploration vessels in every direction, mapping the galaxy. And one of those vessels found something unexpected. She paused. They found a conclave border beacon. The silence in the chamber became absolute. They decoded the beacon's transmissions. They learned about the conclave, about the quarantine, about the decision to seal them away and pretend they didn't exist. They discovered that the rest of the galaxy had known about them for thousands of years and had chosen to treat them as monsters. Kiravel looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every counselor. What would you have done in their position? Rage? Despair? Attack in fury? She shook her head. They did none of those things. They simply prepared. The display changed again, showing a sprawling network of hidden bases, shipyards, and colonies spreading through the dead zones between stars. For 200 years, humanity unified their species. They ended their internal conflicts. They built an industrial base that rivals the conclave's. They reverse-engineered captured conclave probes and improved the technology. They trained armies. They constructed fleets. Kiravel's voice grew quiet. They watched us. They studied us. And they waited. Waited for what? Velith asked. For this. Kiravel pulled up footage from the Battle of HFY 6. They waited for a chance to reveal themselves on their terms, in a way that would force the galaxy to take them seriously. They saved a conclave colony from certain destruction. They showed their power without using it against us. They are sending a message. What message? That they could have come as conquerors, but they chose to come as protectors instead. The chamber erupted in argument. Some counselors demanded immediate alliance with humanity. Others called for preemptive strikes. Still others insisted on returning to the quarantine and pretending none of this had happened. They were still arguing when the news arrived from the Vrexel hegemony. Emperor Krath of the Vrexel had not taken the destruction of his invasion fleet well. The loss of 40 warships and the death of his nephew, the fleet commander, had driven him into a rage that shook the walls of his palace. He had declared total war on humanity, not just retaliation, but complete annihilation. The Vrexel were gathering the largest fleet in their history. 10,000 warships, pulled from every corner of their empire. Every warrior, every weapon, every resource was being directed toward a single goal, the destruction of Earth. Kiravel was chosen as the Conclave's ambassador to humanity. It was meant as an honor, but she knew the truth. The Council expected her to fail. They expected her to watch humanity burn and then report back on the Rexel's new strength. She accepted the mission anyway. The journey to Earth took 3 weeks through fold space. Kiravel spent most of it reading everything she could find about humanity, their history, their culture, their wars. By the time her ship entered the Sol system, she thought she understood them. She was wrong. Earth was beautiful. That was the first surprise. The death world of the legends was a sphere of blue and green and white, spinning peacefully in the light of its yellow sun. Cities sparkled on its surface like scattered jewels. Ships moved through its orbital space in orderly patterns. There was no sign of the chaos or destruction she had expected. Admiral Chun met her at the orbital station. The human woman looked exactly as she had at HFY 6, calm, confident, and faintly amused. "Welcome to Earth, Ambassador," Chun said. "I hope the trip wasn't too rough." "I came to warn you," Kiravel said. "The Vrexel are coming. 10,000 ships. The largest fleet they have ever assembled. They mean to burn your world to ash." Chun nodded slowly. "We know. Then why is everyone so calm? Why are there children playing in the parks? Why are your people not panicking?" Chun smiled. "Come with me." She led Kiravel to a viewing deck overlooking a massive shipyard. Below them, thousands of workers moved among the skeletal frames of warships under construction. The scale was staggering. Dozens of vessels, each larger than anything the Vrexel possessed. 200 years ago, we found out the galaxy considered us monsters, Chun said. We had 2 choices, prove them right or prove them wrong. We chose to prove them wrong, but we also chose to be ready in case we had to prove them right after all. You've been building ships for 2 centuries? Ships, weapons, colonies. Chen's smile faded. We spread through the spaces between your stars, Ambassador. The dark places your people never bothered to explore. We built cities in asteroid belts and moons and gas giant rings. We trained our children in the art of war while hoping they would never have to use it. Kiravel stared at her. How many ships do you have? Chen was quiet for a long moment. Enough. The Vrexel have 10,000 warships. They have been conquering worlds for a millennium. You cannot seriously believe, Ambassador. Chun's voice was gentle but firm. We have been waiting for this moment for 200 years. Every human alive has grown up knowing that someday the galaxy would come for us. We are not afraid of the Vrexel. We are not afraid of anyone. She turned to face Kiravel, and her eyes were steady. The only question is, do you want a front row seat? Kiravel looked at the ships being built below, at the calm efficiency of the workers, at the absolute certainty in Admiral Chun's eyes. And for the first time since this nightmare began, she felt something she had not expected. Hope. The Vrexel fleet arrived at the edge of the Sol system like a plague of metal locusts. 10,000 warships, arranged in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the light of 1,000 conquered worlds. At their center flew the Emperor's flagship, the Wrath of Krath, a vessel so massive that it cast shadows on the ships around it. Emperor Krath himself stood on its bridge, his scales flushed with anticipation. Scan the system, he ordered. Show me what these primates have prepared for us. His sensor officers obeyed. The results appeared on the main display, and Krath began to laugh. 200 ships. That was all Earth had brought to its own defense. 200 warships, huddled together near the 3rd planet, their formation tight and defensive. Compared to the Vrexel Armada, they were nothing, a handful of pebbles against a landslide. They thought they could challenge the hegemony with this. Krath's laughter echoed through the bridge. They destroyed 40 of our ships and thought that made them powerful? They will learn the truth today. They will, Emperor. His sensor officer's voice was strange, hesitant. Something is happening. Krath looked at the display. For a moment, he saw nothing unusual. Then the readings began to change. It started behind Jupiter, the largest planet in the system. A single ship emerged from the shadow of one of its moons, then another, then a dozen, then 100. More ships appeared from behind Saturn's rings, from the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, from Neptune, from Uranus, from the scattered ice bodies at the system's edge. They came from everywhere. Fold space portals tore open across the system, each one disgorging more vessels. They came in every size and design. Massive dreadnoughts bristling with weapons, sleek carriers launching swarms of smaller fighters, heavy siege platforms whose main guns glowed with barely contained energy. They emerged from hidden bases that had been built in the dark spaces between worlds, in hollowed-out asteroids, in the hearts of frozen comets. The sensor display updated. 200 ships became 500. 500 became 1,000. 1,000 became 5,000, then 10,000, then more. When the final count appeared on the screen, Emperor Krath's laughter died in his throat. 14,000 warships. Humanity had brought 14,000 warships to this battle. Impossible, he whispered. They were hiding for 200 years. How could they build so many? But the question answered itself. 200 years of preparation. 200 years of hidden shipyards and secret factories. 200 years of a species forged in fire, united in purpose, driven by the knowledge that someday they would have to fight for their right to exist. The humans had known this day would come, and they had been ready for it. On the bridge of the UN Defiance, Admiral Maya Chung watched the Vrexel fleet with calm eyes. Around her, officers moved with practiced efficiency, each one focused on their assigned tasks. There was no panic, no fear, no uncertainty. Only quiet, deadly purpose. Armada is in position, Admiral, a tactical officer reported. All fleet elements reporting combat ready. Chun nodded. Open a channel to the Vrexel flagship. The channel opened with a burst of static. Chun stood, straightened her uniform, and spoke. Emperor Krath, this is Admiral Maya Chun of the United Earth Navy. You have entered human space with hostile intent. I am offering you one chance to withdraw. Take your fleet and leave. There does not need to be bloodshed today. Krath's face appeared on the display, twisted with rage and wounded pride. You think your numbers frighten me? You are still primitives. You are still animals from a death world. I will burn your planet and scatter your ashes across the void. Chen's expression did not change. I'll take that as a no. She cut the channel and turned to her crew. All ships weapons free. Engage at will. The Battle of Seoul began. 14,000 human ships surged forward, their engines blazing with blue-white fire. The Vrexel fleet opened fire first, filling space with plasma bolts and missile swarms. Shields flared on both sides. Ships began to die, but the humans fought differently than anyone the Vrexel had ever faced. They fought in perfect coordination, each ship moving as part of a larger whole. Their tactics were not elegant or artistic. They were brutal and efficient, designed to maximize damage while minimizing losses. They targeted weapon systems first, crippling enemy ships before finishing them. They concentrated fire on flagships and command vessels, breaking the Vrexel chain of command. And their weapons were terrifying. Vrexel plasma. Cannons could burn through starship hulls in seconds. Human weapons did not burn. They simply erased. Railguns accelerated metal slugs to fractions of light speed, punching through shields and armor as if they were not there. Energy weapons drew power directly from ship reactors, delivering beams that could cut a cruiser in half. Missile swarms carried warheads that released clouds of nanomachines, eating through Vrexel hulls from the inside out. The Vrexel fought with savage courage. They were a warrior species, bred for battle over 1,000 years of conquest. But they had never faced an enemy like this. Every trick they tried, the humans countered. Every formation they adopted, the humans broke. Every trap they set, the humans avoided. Hour after hour, the battle raged. Ships exploded in silent flowers of fire. Debris fields grew so dense that vessels had to navigate around the corpses of their enemies. The void between worlds became a graveyard. Ambassador Kiravel watched from the observation deck of a human carrier, her heart's pounding as she tried to comprehend what she was seeing. The scale was beyond anything in Conclave history. Thousands of ships locked in a dance of death, their weapons painting space with fire. And the humans were winning. Slowly, inexorably, the Rexel line began to collapse. Their flanks crumbled under concentrated assault. Their center buckled as flagship after flagship fell to human guns. Ships that tried to retreat were cut off and destroyed. Ships that tried to surrender were taken prisoner, because even in the midst of battle, the humans accepted surrender. Emperor Krath watched his empire's fleet die around him. "All ships fall back," he screamed. "Retreat. Reformat." He never finished the sentence. The wrath of Krath shuddered as human boarding pods slammed into its hull. Alarms howled. Airlocks blew open. And into the corridors of the flagship came the most terrifying thing the Rexel had ever seen. Human Marines. They moved in perfect formation, their powered armor shrugging off plasma fire, their weapons cutting down everything in their path. They did not shout or scream or rage. They simply advanced, room by room, corridor by corridor, killing anything that stood against them with cold, relentless efficiency. Kraft met his end in the throne room of his own flagship. He stood with his personal guard, surrounded by the bodies of warriors who had died trying to stop the advance. When the Marines breached the final door, he raised his weapon and fired. The shots bounced off powered armor. A Marine stepped forward, rifle raised. Their visor was opaque, expressionless. They said nothing at all. The shot was clean, quick, almost merciful. When the battle ended, the results were broadcast to every corner of the galaxy. The Rexel hegemony had lost 8,000 warships. 80% of their military power gone in a single day. Their emperor was dead. Their command structure was shattered. Their reputation as an unstoppable force was destroyed forever. Human losses 1,700 ships. 12% of their fleet. Admiral Chun stood on the bridge of the Defiance, looking out at the debris field that had once been an invasion force. Her face was tired but satisfied. She opened a channel that would reach every receiver in known space. "This is Admiral Maya Chun of the United Earth Navy, broadcasting to all who can hear. Earth remembers being alone. Earth remembers being afraid. We will never be either again." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was steady and sure. "To those who come in peace, welcome. To those who come in conquest." Another pause. "We'll be waiting." The channel closed. Across the galaxy, 1 billion beings heard the message and understood. The myth was not only real, it was the most powerful force the galaxy had ever seen, and it had chosen to show mercy instead of vengeance. The age of the Conclave was over. The age of humanity had begun. 10 years had passed since the Battle of Sol, and the galaxy was a different place. Kiravel stood on the balcony of the new Galactic Assembly Building, watching ships from a dozen species glide through the orbital lanes above Velanther. The Conclave of 7 Stars was gone, dissolved by unanimous vote in the months following the war. In its place stood something new, a true alliance of equals with humanity as a founding member. Not rulers, not conquerors, partners. She was old now by Sathani standards, her silver scales fading to the same pale gray her grandfathers had worn. But her eyes were still sharp, and her mind was still curious. She had spent the last decade watching the galaxy transform, and still she found herself surprised by what humanity had become. They had not become tyrants. That was the first surprise, and the greatest. The Vrexel had expected to be enslaved or destroyed. Instead, the humans had offered them a choice: reform or face isolation. Most had chosen reform. Under humans' supervised reconstruction, the hegemony had begun to change. Slavery was abolished. Conquered worlds were freed. Former warriors were retrained as builders, teachers, doctors. The galaxy had expected humanity to hoard their advanced technology, using it to maintain their military dominance. Instead, they shared it freely. Human engineers worked alongside conclave scientists, combining their knowledge to create new breakthroughs. Human medical teams traveled to plague-ridden worlds, bringing treatments that had never existed before. Human teachers established universities on 100 planets, offering education to anyone who wanted to learn. And perhaps strangest of all, humans adopted. They took in orphaned alien children from war-torn worlds and raised them as their own. Mixed families became common in human space. Households where Sethani and Keth and even Vrexel children grew up alongside human siblings, learning to see the galaxy not as a collection of separate species, but as a single, sprawling family. Kiravel had asked Admiral Chan about this once, years ago. Why you take such care with others? Why you extend your hand to species that feared you, hated you, wanted you destroyed? Chun had thought about it for a long time before answering. Because we remember what it was like, she had said. We remember being alone in the dark, surrounded by enemies, certain that no one was coming to save us. We remember the fear and the despair and the rage. And we decided that if we ever had the power to make sure no one else felt that way, we would use it. We don't fight because we love war, Ambassador. We fight so that someday, no one will have to. A soft chime interrupted Kiravel's thoughts. She turned to find Torvan standing in the doorway, leaning on a staff carved from ancient wood. He was impossibly old now, his shell more cracked than solid, his eyes dim with age. But he still moved under his own power, and his mind was still clear. You are thinking about them again, he said. I am always thinking about them, Kiravel replied. I have spent 10 years trying to understand them, and I still feel like I am only scratching the surface. Torvan walked slowly to her side, gazing out at the busy sky. I was afraid of them once. We all were. We looked at their history and saw only violence, wars, weapons, the constant struggle for survival. We thought they would bring that violence to the stars. But they didn't. No, they brought something else. Torvan was quiet for a moment. They brought hope. Kiravel nodded slowly. She had seen it herself over and over. Humans who gave their lives to save strangers. Humans who traveled across the galaxy to help species they had never met. Humans who looked at a universe full of fear and division and said, we can do better than this. I asked Maya once, Kiravel said, why they chose mercy instead of vengeance. After everything the galaxy did to them, the quarantine, the dismissal, the attempts to destroy them, they had every reason to hate us. They had had every reason to conquer us and rule us as we feared they would. What did she say? She said that hatred is easy. Vengeance is easy. But they had spent their whole history learning that the easy path leads to destruction. They had burned their own world with nuclear fire because they could not let go of their anger. They had nearly destroyed themselves a dozen times because they could not see past their differences. Kiravel turned to face Torvan. She said that becoming the monsters the galaxy expected would have been the ultimate defeat. It would have proven that all their suffering, all their growth, all their struggle to be better had been for nothing. So they chose the harder path. They chose to forgive. They chose to build. They chose to prove that strength and compassion could exist together. Torvan was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. I was part of the expedition, that placed the quarantine beacons. I helped lock them away. I helped tell the galaxy they were monsters who needed to be contained. His eyes closed. I have spent 1,800 years living with that decision. And now, at the end of my life, I finally understand how wrong I was. He opened his eyes and looked at Kiravel with something like peace. We feared them because we saw ourselves in them what we were before we grew comfortable. They are what we forgot how to be. Survivors who refused to let others suffer as they did. A week later, Kiravel traveled to Earth. She found Maya-chan in a garden in Kyoto, surrounded by cherry trees that were just beginning to bloom. The old admiral was retired now, her military titles traded for simple clothes and quiet days. She sat on a stone bench, teaching a young Vressel boy to fold paper cranes. The boy's scales were dark red, his eyes bright with concentration. He fumbled with the paper, his claws too large for the delicate work. But Maya guided him patiently, her weathered hands gentle as she showed him each fold. Around them, children of a dozen species played together on the grass. Sithani and Keth and human children chased each other through the trees, their laughter mixing into a single joyful sound. A pair of Vrexel teenagers sat under a tree, reading from a shared tablet. A human girl with bright red hair was trying to teach a young conclave boy to do a handstand. Kiravel watched for a long moment before approaching. "Ambassador," Maya said, without looking up. "It's been a while." "It has." Kiravel sat on the bench beside her. "You look well. I look old." Maya smiled. "But that's not a bad thing. Old means I lived. Old means I got to see all of this." She gestured at the children playing around them. Kiravel watched the Vrexel boy finally complete his paper crane. His face lit up with pride, and Maya patted his shoulder with genuine warmth. "The old stories said your kind would burn the galaxy," Kiravel said softly. Maya was quiet for a moment. Then she handed the boy another sheet of paper and turned to face Kiravel. "The old stories were written by people who never met us," she said. "They looked at our history and saw only the violence. They didn't see the poets or the artists or the dreamers. They didn't see the parents who died protecting their children or the strangers who gave their lives to save people they had never met. They saw monsters because that's what they were looking for." She picked up a paper crane and turned it over in her hands. "We're not here to burn anything, Ambassador. We're here to make sure no one else has to burn alone." Across the garden, a human child shouted with joy. She had finally succeeded in teaching the conclave boy to do a handstand, and he was wobbling upside down with a look of delighted terror on his face. A dozen voices, human and alien alike, rose in encouragement. Kiravel watched them, and for the first time in her long life, she felt like she understood. The galaxy had spent 40,000 years building walls between species, between cultures, between worlds. They had looked at differences and seen threats. They had looked at the unknown and felt only fear. And in doing so, they had created the very monsters they claimed to be protecting themselves against. Humanity had come from a world that should have destroyed them. They had survived horrors that would have broken any other species. And instead of letting those horrors define them, they had chosen to become something else. Something better. They had chosen hope. And now, slowly, one paper crane at a time, they were teaching the rest of the galaxy to hope as well. The sun set over Kyoto, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. The children's laughter faded as parents called them home for dinner. The Vrexel boy ran off to join his friends, clutching his paper crane like a treasure. Maya and Kiravel sat together in the growing twilight. Two old soldiers watching a new generation grow. "Thank you," Kiravel said finally. "For what?" "For proving us wrong. For being better than we feared. For giving us a second chance." Maya smiled, and in that smile was all the strength and stubbornness and hope that had carried humanity from a death world to the stars. "That's what families do," she said. And across the galaxy, 1,000 worlds looked up at the stars and saw not darkness, but possibility. The age of fear was over. The age of hope had begun.